Welcome to another episode of The Punk Rock Raider. My name is Dirty D from the Dirty T. I am the Punk Rock Raider. I'm here in my Black Flag representing Damaged. One of the best albums. It's a great day to get a little punk. It's always a good day to get a little punk. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk a lot about the remaining candidates that we have interview requests in for. Continuing the series I started the other day. Before we do that, though, there was some huge news. Dante Moore, Oregon quarterback, presumed quarterback number 2 in the draft, is returning to Oregon. This is the right move for Dante Moore. I stand by thinking that he is more gifted with a higher ceiling. He's a more gifted thrower naturally than Fernando Mendoza. He is a more gifted natural mover. I'm not saying he's faster. I'm not saying he's a better runner. Just mover. It's different things. Than Mendoza. He throws a pretty ball. He's just not ready to be an NFL quarterback. He needs more starts. He needs to be able to have more experience. There's a lot of studies that have shown, like when you look at just the amount of quarterbacks, all the quarterbacks that have been successful, almost all of them have a certain threshold of starts. The more starts you have in college, the more likely you're going to be successful in the NFL. And the people that don't hit that threshold almost always aren't successful. The only real examples I think we have of that are like Cam Newton, who was an alien and also had struggles, but it was an alien, and Ryan Tannehill, who took a while to even get there. So typically, the less experience you are going into the league, the less likely you are going to have success as a quarterback in the NFL. He just needs another year to really, be able to process faster what's going on in front of him. I think he's pretty good at that for his age and his experience level. He needs more time. Just like Ty Simpson needed more time. But Ty Simpson deciding to come out in the draft, don't think that's a great move. Dante Moore going back to Oregon, fantastic move for him. That's the right decision for him. It makes next year's class stronger, this year's class weaker. Hypothetically, it ups the trade value. You could probably get a insane haul for the number 1 overall pick. I think that's not we're just operating under the assumption that Fernando Mendoza is the quarterback for the Raiders, and we're going to talk about what we can do to set him up for success. We will talk further about we're still going to do a quarterback's rankings eventually. We're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of Mendoza. I might even do a bit of a film breakdown, a full scouting report. I will be putting together a Patreon. I'm probably going to set that up next month. I really want that to center around scouting, specifically, full player rankings, full player evals, things like that. So I will have that information out when it is available. But that's the big news circulating today. And it's real juicy. It's real good news. We're going to get into talking about the coaches, though. So this is part 2. Excuse me. We are talking about the all of the coaches, the second round of interviews we set up for head coaches, head coaching interviews for the Raiders. We talked about the first 5, I believe. We have 6 more to talk about today. I will be doing another episode that I will be putting out probably tomorrow that will be talking about guys that we haven't interviewed yet that we've been linked to or, that have been circulating the airways. So we will talk about that, but we're just going to talk about the guys that we are linked to. I've got a lot of thoughts about this. I have a lot of data about these guys. If you enjoy all the content, all of the background checking, all of the opinion and data I'm bringing to this, please, again, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Please tell your fellow Raider Nation fans. Let's bring punk rock back to the Raiders. Let's make sure we are using our voice, having some great discourse, becoming smarter fans. That's what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to do it with, again, Let's go a little punk. Let's go a little punk rock back in here. So without further ado, let's talk about the first candidate we're going to talk about today. All right, the first candidate we're talking about today is Jeff Hafley, the Packers defensive coordinator. He's 46 years old. I'm going to try to just do a brief overview of each candidate because we've got a lot of them today to talk about. So I'm just going to go over the highlights. He spent a lot of his time coaching in the college ranks. He was a defensive back coach for a while in the NFL for about 6 years. And then he did finally get to jump back to the college ranks. He was defensive coordinator in Ohio State as well as their defensive back coach. Then went to Boston College to be their head coach for 3 years. They had a 21-26 regular season record. He was 1-0 in the postseason. And then he left Boston College. He was not fired. And he's been the Packers defensive coordinator since 2024. While I was doing my research on Hafley, I found some things that actually did make me feel a little better. I thought it was really interesting researching his defense. He runs a wide 9 front, so that's like a 4-3 base, 4 down lineman base. He does a lot of five-man pressure and simulated pressure, but he does a lot of wide 9, so that means your edge rushers are lined up extra wide, give them a better path to the quarterback. When he was in college at Ohio State and Boston College, they ran almost like more than anyone else a ton of cover one, which is man coverage across the board, and then you usually have one guy in zone somewhere in the back. So a ton of cover one. When he was hired by Matt LaFleur talked about how he wanted to get away from man coverage and match up coverage principles, which is really interesting because that's what Jeff Hafley did. But over the past 2 years, they have been, like last year especially, they ran the second lowest amount of man coverage of any team in the NFL. They were mostly a cover 3 team. They were almost exclusively a zone coverage team. And they've been top 12 in defense the past 2 years. I know last year they were top 6 in EPA per play, that's expected points against, which is a stable metric that's used, like an advanced metric that's used by a lot of experts and analysts. It really paints a picture of how good a defense or an offense is doing. And then they were also pretty high in defense adjusted value over average, which is another metric used. It's actually used a lot like in betting. So he's done some things that were really successful while he's been with the Packers. He's a pretty young guy. I like the versatility of being able to do zone and man coverage. I like he has experience with both, especially considering the fact that we were a cover 3 team last year, so most of what we have at corner at least is guys that are cover 3 corners. So I like that it seems like he can change his scheme to fit the talent he has around it. At least in the back end, at least with his defensive backs. Now, I do think it's very alarming what has happened to the Packers the second half of the season after Micah Parsons went down. Now, again, they were successful last year. They had a good defense last year, pretty good defense. They had a slump during the middle of the year, and they came on strong towards the end of the year last year. That is encouraging. But this year, towards the end of the year, after Micah Parsons went down, the defense wasn't good. And I don't know that just looking at his entire resume, like, I just don't think he feels like one of the most likely defensive candidates to be the guy that's just not ready to be a head coach. Like when I look at this resume reminds me of when I was looking at Vance Joseph's resume before he became the Broncos head coach. mostly just a defensive back coach. He wasn't even like a passing game coordinator. I get he was a head coach at Boston College, coaching in college, coaching in the NFL. Very different. I do like the versatility he's shown, but like, I just don't know that I would feel confident that he's ready to take on a head coaching job. It would be my big concern. Now, there are things to like about him. He apparently interviews really well. People think he could be a future star. I've heard this. Most of the coaches, or a lot of the coaches that we're talking about through this whole series, are people that's been said about them before. I've heard that said about so many coaches, and a lot of times it doesn't end up that way. There are some guys that, hey, they just don't have the personality people look for. And we've talked about a couple guys like that too. But just because, you hear of all these smart, especially defensive coordinators that people are like, they just got it. And I've heard people talk about Hafley that way. I don't know that I'm there yet. It seems like one of the riskier hires. This is one of the ones that would be lower on my personal list. So if he became the coach, I'd be intrigued to see what staff he can put together, coming from very limited NFL experience, mostly college experience. I just don't know that I think he's ready. Again, it reads to me very similarly to Vance Joseph before he got the Broncos head coaching job. I actually think Vance Joseph is a better head coaching candidate in this cycle than Jeff Hafley is. You can disagree with me if you want. I'm not saying that Joseph is a top 5 or 10 guy for me. I just think that Hafley reads as a guy that's not ready to be a head coach for me personally. All right, we're going to move on to the next candidate here. We're talking about a string of Sean McVay coaching tree disciples. The next 3 will actually all be people from the Rams staff, starting with Nate Scheelhaase, the Rams passing game coordinator. He's only 35 years old. That makes him the second youngest coach we have interviewed in this entire cycle. He was a quarterback in Illinois. He was a 4-star. Spent a few years coaching there. Most of the time has been also in the college ranks, mostly as a positional coach. Did get to be the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach in 2023. And then the past 2 years he's been with the Rams, first as an offensive assistant and the passing game specialist, and then this year as the passing game coordinator. This is a guy that I think should be a very hot name as an offensive coordinator. Maybe he's the next Sean McVay. We're going to say that about a couple people, right? Maybe. But I think he needs more experience, at least at the NFL level, calling plays. He's very young. Hey, you could knock it out of the park with him. You could also end up in a situation the Titans did with Callahan. I would actually assume that we're bringing him more in to talk to him and feel him out as a potential offensive coordinator for another candidate, especially an offensive coordinator within the the tree he's in, the McVay tree. And I would actually be really intrigued by that. I'd be really excited by that. A young guy, early in his journey. I mean, maybe they have a great year and he's plucked to be a head coach right away. Maybe it takes a couple years. I don't know, but that would be intriguing, right? It comes from a really good tree of coaches. So I would put him towards the back end of my list as head coaching candidates. I think it's likely it's just too early. Hey, give him the interview. We're talking to him, see what his plan is, see what his connections are. I do just think that he's just been with the Rams for a few years. More likely he needs more time to season. Bringing him in as an offensive coordinator could be a fantastic move. I view him very similarly to Davis Webb. I don't know between those two guys which one I would feel more confident in. At least Davis Webb did have a few years as a player in the NFL, and he might have crossed paths. No, he didn't cross paths. I was going to say he might have crossed paths with another guy we're going to talk about today, but he's coming from a really good tree as well. I kind of view them similarly, though. You know, Shieldhouse has more coaching experience as well. I just think they would be great offensive coordinators, or at least great offensive coordinator candidates. I'd be really intrigued about bringing them into that position. I would be hopeful if they were head coaches. I think it's too early. I don't even think that's why we brought them in. But going right on further through the Rams tree, we've got Mike LaFleur, Rams offensive coordinator, 38 years old. He's Matt's little bro. He coached in Division II for a couple years, and then in 2014 made the jump to the NFL as an offensive intern for the Browns. Spent a lot of time in the Shanahan and McVay tree. Started in the Shanahan tree with Falcons and 49ers. Was passing game coordinator for them in 2019-2020 with the 49ers, as well as he was passing game coordinator before that with them. And then he made the jump to the Jets to be their offensive coordinator for 2 years. I'm not going to say he had a lot of success. Mostly it was rough, but life with the Jets is mostly going to be rough. He did get a couple great games out of Mike White. Shout out to Mike White. I actually always liked Mike White. But there was a lot of struggles with the Zach Wilson experiment. Got fired when they brought Aaron Rodgers in and his best friend. And then he's been the Rams offensive coordinator ever since, where it is important to note he does not call plays. I think he comes from a great tree. He's coached with both Shanahan's and with McVay. I would be very open to giving him an opportunity to call plays again away from the Jets. And I actually think he's more likely into consideration. Like you're willing to talk to him as a head coach, but I think he's another guy that you're like, hey, if we bring in a defensive mind from your tree, like you could be offensive coordinator for that guy. That is more so how I see him as a candidate here. He's another guy that would be lower on my head coaching candidate list here. I know he's an offensive guy. I know we don't have a ton of those. I mean, we have a mix, but we don't have a ton of Sirius has a ton of experience, offensive-minded coaches in our interview list so far. There's a couple that are out there we haven't interviewed. The ones we've interviewed come with a lot of asterisks so far, and he's one of those that comes with a lot of asterisks because while I like the tree he's come from, the only time we've seen him as a play caller, I think you can have some reasonable doubt that it was his fault, and there was some big moments with Mike White, who, I actually always liked Mike White. I remember when he was coming out of, I think it was Western Kentucky. He did some no-look passes stuff that was really cool. Anyway, this isn't a Mike White show. You can have some reasonable doubt, but that would for me be more about giving him an opportunity to to be a play caller as well as offensive coordinator. Which, because he doesn't call plays with the Rams, you can do. That would be classified as a promotion. So you can offer him that as a promotion. Bring him in, interview him as a head coach, but bring him along as an offensive coordinator, even though he is an offensive coordinator, because he is not a play caller. You are giving him a promotion. He is allowed to do that. He's allowed to leave that job. I don't believe the Rams can block that. But I wouldn't hire him as a head coach. Again, he would be lower on my list of head coach targets. However, he'd be high on my list as an offensive coordinating target. And while we will get to Robert Saleh, another very real possibility. So Chris Shula is a really interesting name in the cycle. One of my favorites of the people we're talking about today. Rams defense coordinator, 39 years old and the grandson of the great Hall of Fame coach Don Shula. He coached at the college level and was grad assistant as well for about 4 years before he made the jump to the NFL with the Chargers in 2015, 2016 as a defensive quality control coach. And then he's been with the Rams ever since, had various roles, has coached mostly linebackers, outside linebackers as well, which in the Rams scheme is edge rushers. And then became the pass rushing coordinator, linebacker coach 2023, and then the defensive coordinator last year and this year as well. Spent most of his career as a coach with Sean McVay. I don't know exactly where I have him ranked at the moment, but he is a guy that I like. And if you could bring Chris Shula as your head coach and LaFleur, or the other guy we talked about with the name that's hard for me to remember, as your offensive coordinator, I think that I would like that pairing more than out of the three guys we've talked about. That'd be my favorite pairing of these three. Honestly, of everyone we've talked about today so far. He's lauded as a really good mind, and the Rams have, I think, the second cheapest defense in the NFL, so they're not spending a lot of money. Now, I kick back on that point just a little because a lot of the success that he's had and what he's been able to do and why he's been so successful is how well they've hit on and how much they have invested in their defensive line during the draft. They have invested heavily on the defensive line during the draft, and hitting on cheap and expensive players, yeah, you can attribute that towards development as well. But hitting on those players, if you give that 3 years, it will be a very expensive defense because they're going to want to pay all of those guys, and they're like 5 or 6 deep now. Like their one free agent addition, really, Poona Ford, has been playing fairly well, although he gets drowned out sometimes. But when you talk about the drafted guys, Jared Verse, elite. Byron Young, the edge rusher, has been like phenomenal. Josiah Stewart, the rookie, played really well. When you look at defensive tackle, I can't think of his name. The guy from Purdue, the other, he's been phenomenal. The white guy from Florida State, phenomenal. They've just hit on all of these defensive line picks. Hey, did Chris Shula, was he part of that development? Well, he's never coached interior defense line. He was never an edge rushing coach. He was a pass rushing coordinator. So, hey, maybe a little bit. But I just think they've been really good at drafting guys. So I'm going to kick back on that a little bit, but still what he's done with like the secondary and linebackers, the talent he's got, the production he's got out of some of those guys is really good, and I think is very much worth interviewing and potentially hiring, especially if you miss out on some of your top guys. Look, there's 9 or 10 head coaching vacancies now, right? Like, while I would rank us somewhere around 4 or 5 out of all the vacancies, based on connections, based off this and that, you never know how the dominoes are going to fall. And if we have a top 3 or 4, we might miss out on our top 3 or 4. If he's your 5 and you end up with him, I feel good about it, especially if we can bring in a Michael LaFleur. Again, he is another guy that is talked about as like a future star coach. McVay speaks about him in very high regard. He's thought of in very high regards in NFL circles. And while I think sometimes that can be rhetoric and be pushed on us, I mean, he spent almost his entire NFL coaching career with the Rams with Sean McVay. He coaches on the defensive side almost exclusively through his coaching career, but he's done some really good things, and he has some good connections to some well thought of offensive minds. Now, with that said, I still think it's a risky hire. And if you're going to hire a defensive coach, there are guys I like more, including, and I know this isn't going to be a popular take. So, Ahiro Evero, the Panthers defense coordinator, who's 45 years old, I like a lot. Actually was on the Raiders practice squad in 2004 as an undrafted safety, and he coached at the college level for quite some time. Um, Actually, he started off only coaching a couple years. My apologies. With the university that was his alma mater, uh, coached with the Bucks as a quality control coach under Gruden for a couple years. Went back to college. Was a special teams coordinator in college, as well as then being a safeties coach. And then came back to the NFL with the 49ers and actually started as an offensive assistant. Went to the defense side of the ball. Went to the Packers, and then in 2017 started coaching with the Rams. Another Sean McVay coaching tree guy. Was there for a couple years before getting the defensive coordinator job with the Broncos in 2022, which was a bad team that didn't do well. But I remember the defense overperforming above expectations. And I remember there being a lot of buzz about this guy as a young, up and coming head coach candidate in that cycle, and he decided he wasn't ready. He still wanted to be defensive coordinator, made the jump with the Panthers in 2023, and he's been with them through two different coaching. He was brought in with Frank Reich. That experiment didn't work out, but they kept him on. Last year was pretty rough for that defense. This year, they actually played really well. There's a lot I like about him as a coach. I think Avero, and like I know we shouldn't go off the picture, but even the picture I got up, man, he looks, he's got some intensity to him. He's got some fire to him. I like that he's coached at all three levels: offense, defense, special teams in his coaching career. I like that he was a former Raider. He has connections to this organization. He's a younger guy. Um, as far as the underrated candidates, like, he's still in my back half of candidates, but I really like Avero as a potential candidate. I This is a guy I couldn't believe some of that. There's just something he's got, that head coaching gene to him. He's just, there's something different about him, and he would be able to really set a culture and change the pulse of this team. He's got a lot of connections to the Shanahan tree. He was with Shanahan for 4 years, 5 years, 4 years. He was with them for a while, 2017 through the 2021 season. And then also, if you do bring Kubiak, here's an interesting thing. I think Vero's contract is up this year. So if you want to bring him in as a defensive coordinator alongside Kubiak, I think you can actually do that. Now, that would be awesome. But I would also be interested in him as a head coach. I would be more interested in Kubiak. And if Kubiak tells me he can bring me a Vero, that's a pairing I like. And I wonder, I guess there's a potential that that was even part of the conversation in bringing Avero in. But Avero has been talked about as a future head coach, as a strong candidate, as a great interview when he's done head coaching interviews in the past. He has done head coaching interviews in the past. He has been thought of as a bright future head coach. And I think we could do worse. Like, I think that Avero could be a very good hire. Again, he's not in my top 5, but I think he could be a good hire. If you start missing out on the bigger names that are atop your list, he is someone I'd be very comfortable with. Um, Again, though, if his contract is up and you can land Kubiak with Vero as your defensive coordinator, That goes close to my top, maybe my top of possible outcomes. I do think Evero is a guy that will eventually be a head coach, so I do think you will eventually lose him. I do think it's easier to replace a defensive coordinator and find a long-term defensive coordinator than an offensive coordinator, but I don't think that necessarily precludes head coaching success. Anyway, that's another discussion for another day. I do like Vero a lot, and I would be happy with a hiring. We only have one more candidate to talk about today. Before we get on to him, again, I want to say, hey, thank you all so much for supporting me, those that have been supporting me. Just all the views I've gotten, the comments I've gotten. Please, if you have any comments to make, if you have any discourse, if you have any discussion, I will happily discuss with you in the comments. I love discourse. I love a debating opinion. I think that only makes us stronger in our positions. Please do not be afraid to do that. Please leave a like. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Share this with your Raider friends. Bring it up when you're with your Raider family, Raider Nation. Hey man, we got to stick together, and our pulse never dies. Raider Nation, we never die. We gotta kick up some more dust though. We gotta get that punk rock energy back in Raider Nation. So please, if you haven't already, become a punk rock Raider. Hit subscribe. We're gonna get on to our final candidate, and finally, we're gonna be talking about Jesse Minter, who I think is the favorite of the front office. I think he's the guy the front office wants to get in. If he wants the job, I think this job is his. He's the Chargers defensive coordinator. He's 42 years old. Spent about 5 seasons in the lower college ranks before making the jump to the NFL in 2017. Actually, I think it was longer. So he was in the college ranks for 10 years. Jumped to the NFL 2017 with the Ravens. Coached with Harbaugh for 3 or 4 years. Went back to college to be a defensive coordinator and safeties coach with Vandy, and then coached a couple years as defensive coordinator with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, other Harbaugh. And then he's still with Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers, defensive coordinator 2024, and then this year as well, where they've been top 12. Actually, I think they've been top 5 both years. Minter is a very popular coach for a reason. He's got connections to Spytek and Brady. He's a Michigan guy. I think what I love about this potential hire, there's a few things I love about it. A, he's young. He's only 42 years old. B, I feel like there would be a lot of continuity between the front office and him. I think it would be really easy for everyone to get on the same page and communicate effectively. And that's one of the number one things I want here. I also like that he has shown that he can be very good at second half adjustments with his defense, and he can also get a lot out of, not saying the Chargers don't have talent on their defense, but elevating the talent he has, getting more out of guys than people previously have, being flexible when there's injury or whatever it is. He has shown to be a really effective, flexible defensive mind. Very much from that Harbaugh tree. Very much, I don't think he's quite a Mike Macdonald with how he runs his defenses, but there's some similarities there to like a Mike Macdonald, especially with, like, again, same cut from the same cloth. They were both Michigan defensive coordinators, both the Harbaugh tree guys. My one I guess I have 2 concerns. My concern about him being the head coach is looking at his history. What connections does he have to the offensive side of the ball? Offensive minds. Who has he worked with? Spent almost all of his NFL time around Greg Roman offenses, who, by the way, is a free agent and is the last name I want to hear for offensive coordinator. Um, at Michigan, I think it was Sherrone Moore. I think they might have had like a co-offensive coordinator thing going on. Sherrone Moore, I don't think is going to be a coach for anyone. Um, so that's my one concern about him as a coach. I don't think that would stop him from being successful, though. Um, I think you can still build a winning culture. You can still build a foundation while and that part of that foundation can be just the identity of the overall player, the identity of the team, the character of the team, and then the character of the defense, right? You could have said the same things about Mike McDonald. And look, he ended up with Clint Kubiak, and he went outside of the box and was able to find something that has worked out really well for Seattle this year. I also have a concern about whether we can land Minter. I think my bigger concern is that there's a lot of connections to him with the Ravens job. I think he's going to be the guy we want to bring in. I think he is the way we viewed like Ben Johnson last year, Mike Vrabel, maybe even you could say just Mike Vrabel, like our number one option that we're looking at to be our coach. I very well could see him taking the Baltimore job. I think I've heard arguments both ways, but I think generally the Baltimore job will be considered the better job. And I think if he's offered that job, like he has history there. I understand he has history with like connections with Spytek and Brady. I don't think they've ever worked together, but they have connections. But he has worked with the Ravens organization, the Ravens front office. He has ties there. And that is a roster ready to compete day one. They need to update their roster a little bit, but you still have one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. That's my bigger concern of like, do we even have a shot at landing Minter? It really comes down, I think, to whether or not he's the Ravens guy. I would love this hire. It'd be a slam dunk hire. It would be of everyone that we have set to interview, right alongside the Clint Kubiak hire. I think on paper, I'd give the edge to Kubiak. I think if you delve deeper, it's very possible that Minter's actually the better guy for the job. I could see it going either way, really. But my concern really is he even an option if the Ravens go, hey, Jesse Minter, we want you to take over our organization. So that's all my candidates for today. I'm going to release another video coming out tomorrow about guys we are rumored to have interest in that we have not interviewed. And talk about those guys. I think I will also do I might do it as an individual video, a ranking of head coaching vacancies and a ranking of the guys we've interviewed. I think maybe in the next episode, alongside the guys we haven't interviewed, I will rank the guys we have by favorite to please no. That's it for today. Again, my name is Dirty D from the Dirty T. I am the Punk Rock Raider. All y'all Punk Raider motherfuckers out there, have a great rest of your day. Raiders!